At the edge of autumn, as mist rolled over the golden fields, a river became the border between slavery and freedom. From the east thundered 120,000 riders, their banners black as storm clouds, their arrows blotting out the sun. Across the river waited 60,000 Russians, peasants, nobles, and monks, their armor dull, their faith unbroken. They crossed the river and burned the bridge behind them, closing every path of retreat. Only forward meant survival. Trumpets roared, the earth shook. The clash of hooves and steel turned the plains into chaos. Spears shattered, shields split, men vanished into mud and smoke. The wind carried only screams and the ring of iron. When the fog lifted, silence fell across the field. And amidst the fallen stood a prince, bloodied yet unbowed, the one who had led his people through fire to claim their first breath of freedom in 200 years. For more than 2 centuries, the land that would one day be called Russia knelt beneath the hooves of the Golden Horde. The Mongols had come like a storm from the east, burning, breaking, and ruling through fear. Each Russian principality paid tribute to the Khan, sending gold, fur, and even sons as hostages. No one dared defy them. No one, until Dmitry Ivanovich of Moscow. By the year 1380, the empire of the Horde was not what it once was. Internal wars had divided its power. Rival Khans fought for the same throne. One of them, Mamaye, was not even a true descendant of Genghis Khan, but he ruled by force, demanding obedience from his Russian vassals. When Dmitry refused to send more tribute, Mamaye decided to make an example of him. It would be a punishment so brutal that no prince would ever think of rebellion again. But Dmitry was no ordinary prince. Young, shrewd, and deeply religious, he believed that the time of submission was over. He saw the Horde weakening and sensed destiny pulling Moscow toward leadership of all Rus. If he could unite the divided Russian lands under one banner, even for one battle, then Moscow would no longer be a subject of the steppe. It would become the heart of a new nation. The two forces could not have been more different. Mamaye's army numbered close to 120,000 men, a sea of horse archers, Tatar lancers, and Genoese mercenaries from the Black Sea coast. They moved with terrifying speed, striking from a distance, vanishing like wind. Their strength was mobility and chaos, their weakness, arrogance and disunity among hired men. Dmitry's army gathered barely 60,000 warriors, drawn from the principalities of Moscow, Tver, Rostov, Suzdal, and Ryazan. They were infantry-heavy, armored in iron and faith. They lacked cavalry, they lacked experience, but they possessed something the Horde had forgotten: belief. They fought not for loot, but for deliverance. Dmitry's greatest weapon was his mind. He studied the steppe's tactics, learning when the Mongols struck and how they encircled their prey. He chose not to meet them in open plains where horses ruled, but in the fields of Kulikovo, near the Don River, a narrow landscape bordered by marshes and forests. There, the thundering hooves of the Horde would have no room to maneuver. There, the earth itself would fight for Russia. The stage was set. The master of the steppe and the son of Moscow both prepared to gamble everything. For gold, for faith, for the soul of a nation. Word spread across the Russian lands like a spark through dry grass. Dmitry of Moscow had defied the Horde. For the first time in 200 years, a Russian prince had said no to the steppe. At first, many doubted him. The princes of Ryazan and Novgorod feared that resistance would bring ruin. Others whispered that Moscow's young ruler was a fool chasing glory. But as the days passed, something stirred in their hearts. A forgotten memory of freedom. Dmitry sent riders north and west, calling every principality to arms. His message was simple: the Horde is not invincible. The time has come to stand as one. Let us fight not for tribute, but for our children's future. Slowly, banners began to rise across the plains. Men from Rostov, Tver, and Suzdal marched toward Moscow. Blacksmiths worked day and night, forging armor and sharpening blades that had not seen battle for generations. Monks blessed the soldiers, sprinkling holy water over their swords. The bells of Moscow rang, not in mourning, but in defiance. By late summer, an army of 60,000 men had gathered beneath the crimson and gold banners of Moscow. They came on horseback, on foot, with spears, axes, and faith. Some were seasoned warriors, many were farmers holding rusty weapons. But all looked to Dmitri, who stood beneath the great wooden cross, silent and calm. Far to the south, Mamaye learned of this defiance. Furious, he called his allies. Genoese mercenaries from the Black Sea, Tatar tribes from Crimea, and remnants of the Horde still loyal to him. When they assembled, his force swelled to over 120,000. The steppe thundered once again. Mamaye believed victory was certain. He would crush Moscow's army in one blow, burn their cities, and drag Dmitri's body before the Khan. But Dmitri had no intention of waiting behind his walls. He knew that to fight near Moscow would invite devastation upon his people. So he made a decision that would change history. He would march south to meet Mamaye on open ground. He would cross the Don River, leaving no bridge behind. There would be no retreat. In early September, as mist drifted low over the fields of Kulikovo, the Russian host took its position. To the west, hidden in a forest hollow, Dmitri placed a reserve regiment under the command of Prince Vladimir Serpukhov and the veteran Bobrock-Volinsky. They would wait for the perfect moment to strike. To the east, Mamaye's banners appeared, black, red, and gold, rolling like waves. Trumpets blared across the steppe. Two worlds faced each other, the nomads of the endless plain and the sons of the Northern Cross. Between them, only silence and the promise of a dawn that would decide the soul of Russia. Dawn broke over Kulikovo field, shrouded in mist. The wet grass glistened beneath the rising sun, and the Don River whispered behind the Russian lines, a silent reminder that there would be no retreat. For a moment, the two armies simply stared at each other across the open plain. Tens of thousands of men, silent, waiting. Then a single trumpet screamed. The ground began to tremble. The Golden Horde moved first. Waves of light cavalry galloped forward, black banners snapping in the wind. Their hooves shook the earth. Their arrows darkened the sky. From the mist, the first rain of death fell upon the Russian front ranks. Men lifted shields and crossed themselves as the sky turned into a swarm of iron. But Dmitri's lines held. Spearmen locked shields shoulder to shoulder, forming a wall of faith and steel. Behind them, the archers of Moscow answered, arrows whistling upward like a storm of vengeance. The field vanished into dust, screams, and smoke. Then came the charge. Mamaye unleashed his heavy cavalry. Tatar horsemen, lances lowered, roaring across the field. They slammed into the Russian front like a tidal wave. Armor splintered. Horses screamed. Men were thrown into the mud, trampled beneath hooves. But the Russians did not break. They closed ranks again and again, pushing forward inch by inch, fighting not with formation, but with fury. In the chaos, Prince Dmitri fought among his men, indistinguishable from any soldier. He had donned the armor of a common warrior so the enemy would not recognize him. Beside him, his banner-bearer, dressed in the prince's own armor, fell beneath a rain of arrows. The Mongols shouted that Dmitri was dead, and their morale surged. They pressed harder, driving the Russians back toward the river. The plain became a nightmare of motion. Horsemen chasing scattered foot soldiers, blood mixing with mud. Bodies lying so thick that neither side could move without stepping on the fallen. Every clash of steel sent echoes rolling across the mist. Yet behind the chaos, hidden in the forest to the west, the ambush waited. The reserve regiment under Prince Vladimir Serpukhov and Bobrock-Volinsky watched the battlefield churn and burn. They waited for the signal, the moment when the Horde, thinking victory near, would stretch too far. As the sun climbed higher, the Mongols began to push deeper into the Russian center. Their arrows thinned, their ranks scattered in triumph. They believed the field was theirs, and that was when Bobrock raised his hand. A horn sounded from the woods, deep, echoing, relentless. The trees erupted. Hundreds of Russian horsemen burst from the shadows, screaming, "For the cross! For Russia!" They slammed into the Horde's exposed flank like thunder. Surprised and trapped between two forces, the Mongol line buckled. What had been a slaughter became chaos reversed. Men who had chased now fled. The hunters became the hunted. Through dust and screams, Dimitri's banner rose again. Mud-stained but unbroken, he lifted his sword and charged into the storm. Steel met steel, flesh met fate. The Battle of Kulikovo had entered its hour of reckoning. The plain of Kulikovo was no longer a battlefield. It was a storm of screams and steel. Dust and smoke wrapped the sky in a gray shroud. The air itself seemed alive, trembling with the clash of blades and the thunder of hooves. The Golden Horde, once unstoppable, now reeled in confusion. The sudden strike from the western woods had shattered their lines. Horsemen who had charged with pride now fought to escape the trap they themselves had built. Everywhere, cries of panic echoed in Mongol and Tatar tongues. The steppe, their home for centuries, had turned against them. Prince Dmitri Donskoy, his armor cracked and covered in blood, fought shoulder to shoulder with his men. He had taken wounds to the arm and face, yet refused to fall back. His sword moved slower now, but his eyes burned with the light of something greater than victory: deliverance. Beside him, the monks who had marched with the army carried crosses high above the chaos, chanting over the roar of war. Lord, bless this land. Let the light return to Rus. For hours the battle raged without end. The river Don ran red. Bodies of men and horses lay piled in heaps, and the smell of iron and smoke filled the air. Mamai, seeing his grand army collapsing, tried to rally his troops. He shouted orders, striking down deserters, calling his captains by name. But it was too late. The ambush had broken the Horde's spirit. Discipline dissolved. Panic spread like fire in dry grass. The Russian cavalry pressed forward, driving the enemy toward the swampy riverbanks. Those who tried to flee found no mercy. The same terror the Horde had brought to Russia for generations now fell upon them. Men who had once burned villages were cut down in the mud. The empire of fear was drowning in its own shadow. As the sun sank, the battlefield fell silent. Only the moaning of the wounded and the cawing of crows remained. Where once stood an army of 120,000, now only a few thousand survivors fled into the twilight. Mamai himself escaped the field, his banners torn, his legend broken. He would never command again. When the fighting stopped, Dimitri's soldiers searched for their prince. They found him unconscious, half buried among the fallen, his armor dented and unrecognizable. Believing him dead, they wept until his fingers moved. A murmur spread through the ranks. The prince lives. Dmitri rose slowly, his face pale, his voice hoarse. He looked upon the field of Kulikovo, a wasteland of corpses yet glimmering with the light of a new dawn. He whispered almost to himself, "From this blood, Russia's born." All around him, soldiers knelt, some weeping, some praying. The cross was raised high over the field, glinting red in the setting sun. For the first time in 200 years, the land of Rus stood free. It was not a victory of conquest. It was a resurrection. The battle was over, but victory came wrapped in silence and death. The fields of Kulikovo stretched for miles, carpeted with bodies, friend and foe alike. Smoke drifted low, and the crows had already begun their dark feast. Of the 60,000 Russians who had marched to the dawn, nearly half would never return. Yet among the living, there was no despair, only awe. When the survivors gathered around Dmitri Donskoy, they knelt in the mud, their armor cracked, their faces streaked with blood and tears. The prince, still pale and weak, looked to the horizon where the sun rose through the mist and whispered, "This is not the end of war, but the beginning of freedom." Messengers rode across the Russian lands carrying word of the impossible. For the first time in 2 centuries, the Horde had been defeated in open battle. The news spread like fire through villages and monasteries. Church bells rang from Novgorod to Vladimir. Old men wept. Women fell to their knees in prayer. And in every heart, a single thought took root: Russia could stand on its own. In the steppe, Mamai fled to Crimea, his army scattered, his power broken. Soon after, betrayed by his own allies, he was cut down, a forgotten warlord buried by the same chaos he once commanded. But Dmitry Donskoy became something greater than a victor. He became a symbol. He had proven that the unity of Rus was not a dream, but a destiny written in blood. Though the Golden Horde would return to raid and burn, they would never again command the same fear. On the field of Kulikovo, monks built a wooden chapel. They buried the fallen, Russian and Tatar alike, under a single cross, for all had shared the same sky, the same earth, the same judgment of history. Every year, pilgrims would come to kneel there, touching the soil still dark with ancient blood. They did not speak of defeat or victory, only of rebirth. Centuries have passed since the mist lifted from the fields of Kulikovo, but the echoes of that day still live within the soul of Russia. The victory did not end Mongol rule overnight. The Golden Horde would return, demanding tribute once more. Yet something fundamental had changed. The fear was gone. The Russians had learned that the Horde could bleed. From that moment, a seed was planted. The seed of a nation that would one day stretch from the Baltic to the Pacific. Moscow rose from a provincial fortress into the heart of a growing realm. Princes became rulers, and rulers became czars. And through every war that followed, against Tatars, Poles, Swedes, and Napoleon, the people of Russia looked back to Kulikovo as their first awakening. In cathedrals, the name Dmitry Donskoy was spoken not as a warrior, but as a saint. Painters, poets, and monks told the story of how faith and unity triumphed over fear. For them, Kulikovo was not just a battlefield, it was the cradle of Russian identity. Even today, when dawn rises over the Don River, the mist moves like a memory across the fields. Locals say you can still hear the faint sound of hooves and the low murmur of men whispering prayers in the fog. It is said that Dmitry's spirit still walks the land he freed. Not as a conqueror, but as a guardian watching over the heart of Russia. Kulikovo was more than a victory. It was a revelation. The moment a broken people remembered who they were and realized they could stand against the world. From the mud, from the blood, from the silence after battle, a nation was born.